The moment Prince Harry walked into London's High Court that January morning, he believed he was stepping into another chapter of his long war against the tabloids, another battle against newspapers he had blamed for years of pain, harassment, and emotional damage, another day defending the woman he loved, Meghan Markle. But what unfolded inside that courtroom didn't feel like a legal hearing. It felt like an explosion, and the blast didn't come from the press. It came from inside Harry's own world. At first, everything seemed routine. Cameras flashed outside the courthouse. Reporters shouted questions. Harry walked past them with the same composed face he had worn many times before during this lawsuit against the publishers of the Daily Mail. For years, he had insisted the tabloids had crossed the line, hacking phones, invading privacy, turning his marriage into a public spectacle. Elton John and Elizabeth Hurley were part of similar legal battles, all claiming the same thing, that powerful media organizations had treated their private lives like entertainment. Inside the courtroom, Harry had already given emotional testimony earlier that day. His voice cracked as he described the relentless headlines, the photographers waiting outside their home, the pressure that followed Meghan everywhere she went. He told the court the media had made Meghan's life unbearable, that their love story had been turned into a battlefield, that they had been hunted. For a moment, the room seemed sympathetic. Then something changed. Judge Timothy Fancourt suddenly requested a short recess, 30 minutes, just enough time to review new evidence that had been submitted by the defense. Harry's lawyers exchanged confused glances. They hadn't been warned, no one had. When the court resumed, the atmosphere had shifted so dramatically it felt like walking into a completely different room. The calm tension of a legal proceeding had been replaced by something heavier, darker, like the air before a storm breaks, because the evidence didn't come from a journalist. It came from someone who had once stood inside Harry and Meghan's inner circle. Jason Knopf, the former palace communications secretary who had worked for both the Sussexes and the Cambridges, the man who had seen everything. Knopf had submitted a sworn statement along with a massive collection of emails, private messages, and internal communications stretching back years. And as the judge began reading excerpts aloud, the silence in the courtroom became suffocating, because these messages didn't sound like private frustrations. They sounded like strategy, calculated, detailed, cold. One email from December 2018 immediately grabbed the room's attention. It referenced the controversial royal biography Finding Freedom, written by journalists Omid Scobie and Carolyn Durand. For years, Harry and Meghan had insisted they had nothing to do with that book. Their lawyers had repeated that claim again and again. But according to the emails being read in court, Meghan had personally sent briefing notes to Knopf, information meant to be passed to the authors, details about her wedding, about her father, about palace conflicts. The email showed something even more disturbing. Knopf had warned that it was important the couple could later say they didn't facilitate access. Harry reportedly replied that he agreed completely. They had to be able to say they weren't involved, but giving background context would help get the truth out. In other words, publicly deny, privately cooperate. A murmur rippled through the courtroom, but the revelations were only beginning. Judge Fancourt continued reading, more emails, more discussions, and suddenly the story became much bigger than a biography. The messages described conversations about media narratives, about shaping public perception, about controlling the story. One message discussed how certain personal details should be released at specific moments to generate maximum sympathy. Another outlined which members of the royal family should be positioned as contrast points, not direct enemies, but useful comparisons. Names appeared: Prince William, Catherine, Princess of Wales, and even Camilla, Queen Camilla. According to the emails, their public images could serve as narrative tools, characters in a broader story that made Harry and Meghan appear modern, progressive, misunderstood. The courtroom remained frozen. Then the judge read something that made several people audibly gasp. One email suggested that Harry's grief over his mother Diana, Princess of Wales, could be strategically highlighted during key interviews. The message allegedly described his trauma as a powerful source of public sympathy, and it outlined how emotional revelations about Diana should be spaced out across media appearances to maximize impact. The ultimate moment? The interview with Oprah Winfrey. The message suggested Harry should appear emotional but controlled, vulnerable but composed. The goal was to position Meghan as a modern reflection of Diana, a woman mistreated by the institution. At that exact moment, witnesses inside the courtroom noticed Harry's face change. Color drained from his skin. His hands slowly curled into fists on the table. His jaw tightened. He looked like a man who had just been struck by something invisible. Not anger, something worse. Shock. His lawyer immediately stood and requested a break, saying Harry was experiencing emotional distress. Judge Fancourt refused. The evidence would continue. And it did. Another email revealed conversations about the couple's future business plans, including the massive content deal with Netflix through their production company Markle Productions. The messages discussed how their departure from the royal family should unfold, not quietly, not peacefully, but dramatically, because drama increased value. According to the emails, leaving under controversy would make their story more attractive to streaming platforms and global audiences. If they appeared to be victims of an outdated institution, the world would want to hear their side, and that meant bigger deals, bigger interviews, bigger attention. Harry sat motionless as the judge continued reading. Witnesses later said he barely blinked. Then came another revelation: the discussion about Archie's title, their son, Prince Archie of Sussex. The messages suggested allowing the public to believe Archie had been denied a royal title because of racism, even though the real explanation involved complicated rules established by George V in 1917. The strategy, according to the emails, was simple. The truth was too complicated. Public outrage was easier, and outrage generated sympathy. By now, Harry's breathing had reportedly become shallow. One of his security officers quietly moved closer to his seat, not to intervene, just in case. Judge Fancourt paused and looked directly at him. Did he need a break? Harry shook his head slowly, but he didn't speak. He just stared at the table, like someone whose entire reality was cracking open in front of him. And the worst part? The judge wasn't finished yet, because the next set of emails would dig even deeper into the strategy behind their public image and reveal conversations about miscarriages, interviews, and even Harry's mental health that would shake the courtroom even further. The courtroom thought the worst had already been revealed. They were wrong, because the next emails that Judge Timothy Fancourt began reading would push the tension inside that courtroom to a level no one had expected when the day started. The evidence moved into deeply personal territory, the kind of details most couples keep buried inside private conversations. But now, every word was echoing through the high court as lawyers, reporters, and spectators listened in stunned silence. The messages showed discussions about one of the most painful moments in Meghan Markle's life, the miscarriage she later revealed publicly in a moving essay for the New York Times. At the time, that essay had shaken millions of readers. In November 2020, Meghan wrote about the loss of a child she suffered months earlier while holding her son, Prince Archie of Sussex. The story had been heartbreaking, describing the grief she and Prince Harry experienced together. Many people saw it as raw honesty. But according to the emails now being read in court, the essay had been discussed strategically months before it appeared. The messages showed Meghan speaking with former palace aide Jason Kanoff about how the story could be framed not just as a personal tragedy, but as a moment that would strengthen the narrative surrounding their experiences with the British press. The messages suggested careful thought had gone into the timing of the story, when it should appear, how it should connect to broader themes about media pressure and emotional trauma, how it could resonate with audiences, particularly in America. Inside the courtroom, the reaction was immediate. People shifted in their seats. Some reporters stopped typing for a moment, simply staring at the judge as he continued reading. But the revelations didn't stop there, because the evidence moved next to the most explosive media moment of the couple's public life, the famous interview with Oprah Winfrey in March 2021. That interview had captivated the world. Millions watched as Harry and Meghan sat together describing their experiences inside the royal family. They spoke about isolation, racism, mental health struggles, and the pain of leaving royal life. At the time, the interview felt spontaneous, emotional, almost unpredictable, but the emails painted a different picture. They showed months of preparation behind the scenes, detailed notes about what topics should be discussed, which revelations should be saved specifically for that moment, which members of the royal family should be criticized directly, and which ones should be handled carefully. One message reportedly warned that criticizing Elizabeth II directly would be dangerous because of her enormous popularity, but others were seen as safer targets. Charles III, Prince William, even Camilla, Queen Camilla was mentioned in the strategy discussions. The messages suggested Camilla could easily be positioned as a controversial figure because public resentment toward her still lingered from the years following the marriage breakdown between Charles and Diana, Princess of Wales. Inside the courtroom, the tension grew heavier with every sentence. And then came another revelation that cut even deeper. The emails included conversations about Harry's mental health. For years, Harry had spoken openly about therapy and trauma, especially the impact of losing his mother at just 12 years old. His willingness to talk about those struggles had made him a powerful advocate for mental health awareness. But the emails suggested something disturbing. They described discussions about how Harry's openness about therapy and trauma could be used strategically to connect with audiences and strengthen the couple's brand. According to the messages, vulnerability was powerful, but it had to be controlled. Harry should appear wounded but hopeful, honest but not unstable, emotional but never out of control. As these words echoed through the courtroom, observers noticed Harry sitting perfectly still. His posture hadn't changed for nearly an hour. His hands remained locked together on the table, his eyes fixed on a point in front of him that no one else could see. Some said he looked like a man trapped inside his own thoughts. The evidence continued. The emails revealed discussions about their children, Archie and Princess Lilibet of Sussex. The messages suggested careful planning about how the children would appear in public content. They should remain mostly private, but small glimpses, birthday photos, holiday images, brief appearances could be released strategically, enough to maintain interest, enough to keep the public emotionally connected, but never enough to satisfy the curiosity completely. Controlled access. A carefully managed mystery. Then the messages shifted again, this time discussing their complicated relationship with the rest of the royal family after moving to California. The emails described a delicate balance. They could criticize the institution, but they needed to maintain the appearance of loving the individuals inside it. That way, they could continue attacking the system without appearing cruel toward Harry's family members. The strategy allowed them to say they still cared about Charles, William, and Kate as people while continuing to frame the monarchy itself as the problem. The judge finally finished reading the last section of evidence, and the courtroom sat in complete silence. No one moved, not even Harry. He had been sitting in exactly the same position for more than an hour. When his lawyer gently placed a hand on his shoulder, Harry flinched as if he had forgotten where he was. The defense lawyers for Associated Newspapers stood and addressed the court. Their argument was simple but devastating. If the emails were authentic, they suggested the couple had actively participated in shaping media narratives while simultaneously claiming to be victims of press intrusion. In other words, they argued Harry and Meghan couldn't accuse newspapers of exploiting their private lives if they had been strategically feeding stories and managing publicity themselves. Harry's legal team immediately pushed back. They argued the case was about illegal information gathering by newspapers, not private communications between Meghan and her staff. But the damage had already been done, because the courtroom wasn't the only place hearing this story. Outside the High Court, reporters were already broadcasting the revelations across the world. Within hours, headlines exploded across Britain and America. Questions flooded social media. Supporters who had defended Meghan began to hesitate. Harry returned to California days later, arriving quietly at the Montecito home he shared with Meghan and their children. He looked older than his years, tired, heavy with questions. Because if the evidence revealed in that courtroom was true, then the battle Harry had been fighting against the media might have uncovered something far more painful. Not a conspiracy from the outside, but a story being written from within.